Blue stood nervously at the entrance of Earth's International University, her antenna twitching with excitement and worry. The tall glass buildings sparkled in the morning sunlight, nothing like the crystal structures of her home world. She checked her translator badge for the 10th time, making sure it was properly attached to her light blue uniform. Around her, humans and aliens of all shapes and sizes moved with purpose, some walking, others floating or rolling. Blue took a deep breath, remembering all her training about proper behavior on Earth. As the first of her kind to attend an Earth university, she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. "You must be Blue." A cheerful voice made her jump. A human girl with bright red hair tied in a messy bun stood before her, wearing paint-splattered overalls and a huge smile. "I'm Amy, your roommate. Welcome to Earth." Blue quickly began the formal greeting ritual of her people. She stepped back exactly 3 paces, lowered her antenna to a 45-degree angle, and began humming the traditional welcome tone. But before she could complete the first verse, Amy had already stepped forward with her fist held out. "Here on Earth, we just do this," Amy said, holding up her closed fist. Blue stared at it in confusion. Was this some kind of threat display? Her cultural training hadn't covered this. I don't understand," Blue admitted, her antenna drooping slightly. "Is this a challenge ritual?" Amy laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was warm and friendly. No, it's a fist bump. You just make a fist like mine and gently tap them together. It's how friends say hi." Blue looked at her own 4-fingered hand, carefully curled it into a ball like Amy's, and very gently touched it to the human's fist. Amy beamed at her. "Perfect. Now you're getting the hang of Earth customs. Come on, let me show you our room. I hope you don't mind, but I've already set up my art studio by the window." As they walked through the campus, Blue noticed how differently humans treated formal spaces compared to her people. Students sat on grass, leaned against walls, and even walked backward while talking to friends. On her world, such casual behavior would have earned severe disapproval. Their room was a surprise too. One half was organized chaos, easels, canvases, and colorful splatters everywhere. The other half was still clean and empty, waiting for Blue's things. "I know it's a bit messy," Amy said, moving some paintbrushes from a chair so Blue could sit, "but I promise I keep my chaos contained to my side." "It's very human," Blue said carefully, not wanting to offend. To her surprise, Amy grinned. "Thanks. That's what I aim for. Oh, and before I forget." Amy reached into a drawer and pulled out a small package wrapped in colorful paper. "It's a welcome gift. We humans like giving presents to new friends." Blue's antenna shot straight up in alarm. But the cultural exchange guidelines clearly state that gifts are only to be exchanged after establishing a formal friendship contract after 3 months of successful interaction. Amy blinked, then started laughing again. "Oh man, who wrote those guidelines? That's not how we do things at all. Here, just open it." With trembling fingers, Blue carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small potted plant with lovely blue flowers that seemed to shimmer in the light. "It's called a blue star flower," Amy explained. "I thought it matched your color, and it's supposed to be really easy to take care of. Plus, having some life in the room makes it feel more like home." Blue felt her eyes water slightly. On her world, such a thoughtful, personal gift would have taken months of careful relationship building. Yet here was this human, freely offering friendship and kindness from the very first moment. "Thank you," Blue whispered, holding the pot carefully. I think I have a lot to learn about how humans do things." Amy smiled and sat cross-legged on her bed, another posture that would have scandalized Blue's teachers. "That's what makes it fun. And hey, maybe I'll learn some cool alien stuff from you too." Looking at her new roommate's bright smile, Blue realized that maybe, just maybe, not following the rules exactly wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. 2 weeks into the semester, Blue sat in the university's art studio, watching Amy work on her latest project. According to all the textbooks Blue had studied, art was supposed to follow strict rules. Each species had their traditional methods, developed over thousands of years. But Amy wasn't following any rules at all. "What are you doing?" Blue asked, her antenna twitching in confusion as Amy mixed sand into her paint. The manual clearly states that earth acrylic paints must not be contaminated with foreign materials. Amy looked up from her canvas, her face spotted with different colors of paint. Who says, sometimes breaking the rules makes something amazing? Look. She held up her work, showing how the sand had created a sparkling, textured surface that caught the light in beautiful ways. Across the studio, other alien students worked carefully at their stations. Green, a tall student with spiral arms, followed the traditional techniques of her people, carefully laying down one precise line at a time. Red, a crystalline being, created art by refracting light exactly as his species had done for millennia. "But how do you know it will work?" Blue asked, moving closer to examine Amy's painting, without following proper procedures. "I don't," Amy said cheerfully, adding more sand to her paint. "That's the fun part. Sometimes it fails completely, but when it works." She stepped back, adding a splash of blue paint mixed with tiny glass beads. Magic happens. Blue watched in fascination as the painting took shape. It wasn't like any art she had ever seen before. The texture changed with every angle, creating an almost living quality to the image. It seemed to break every rule in the book, yet it was undeniably beautiful. "Would you like to try?" Amy held out a brush to Blue. Blue's antenna went rigid with shock. "Me? But I'm not trained in earth art techniques. I could make a mistake." "That's okay. Mistakes are how we learn new things. Here, I'll show you." Before Blue could protest further, Amy had guided her to a blank canvas. She showed Blue how to mix the paint with different materials: sand, glass beads, even some sparkly powder that Amy called glitter. "Just feel the paint," Amy encouraged. "Don't think about rules. What looks good to you?" Hesitantly, Blue dipped her brush in the paint. Her hand shook as she made the first stroke, waiting for someone to stop her. But nobody did. Instead, Amy nodded encouragingly. As minutes passed, Blue found herself becoming more confident. She mixed colors that would have been considered clashing in her world's art. She added texture in ways that broke every rule she'd been taught. And slowly, something new emerged on her canvas. "Blue, that's amazing," Amy exclaimed, looking at the finished piece. "I've never seen anything like it." The painting combined the precise patterns of Blue's people with the free-flowing style she'd learned from Amy. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Other students began gathering around, both human and alien, admiring the unusual technique. "But I didn't follow any of the proper methods," Blue said, still worried. "The art council back home would never approve." "Who cares?" Amy said, putting an arm around Blue's shoulders. "Art isn't about following rules. It's about creating something that speaks to people. And this," she gestured at Blue's canvas, "this definitely speaks." Professor White, their art teacher, walked over to examine Blue's work. Blue held her breath, waiting for criticism about her lack of proper technique. Instead, the professor smiled. "Now this," Professor White said, "is exactly what we hope to see at this university. True innovation comes from being brave enough to try new things." "Well done, Blue." As other students began asking Blue about her techniques, she realized something important. Humans didn't just break rules for the sake of breaking them. They did it to discover new possibilities. And maybe, just maybe, that was a lesson worth learning. The university's main hall buzzed with excitement as students prepared for the Interspecies Cultural Festival. Colorful lights filled the space, and music from a dozen worlds played through floating speakers. Blue stood at the edge of the dance floor, her antenna swaying gently to the beat of an Earth song called pop music. "Come on, Blue," Amy called from the dance floor. "The best way to learn is to join in." Blue watched in amazement as her human roommate moved to the music. There was no pattern she could recognize, no standard steps or formal movements. Amy just danced. She spun, jumped, and swayed however she wanted. Other humans did the same, each moving differently, but somehow all fitting together. But where are the designated dance patterns? Blue asked, clutching her datapad. I've downloaded all 17 volumes of Earth dance history, but I can't find these movements anywhere. Amy laughed, dancing over to her friend. We're not following any patterns. We just move however the music makes us feel. This concept shocked Blue more than anything else she'd learned about humans so far. On her world, every dance was carefully choreographed. Each movement had meaning, passed down through generations. The idea of moving without a plan seemed impossible. Watch the other aliens, Amy suggested, pointing around the room. Blue looked. Most alien students danced in their traditional ways. Green performed her species' ritual spiral dance, each movement precise and calculated. Red pulsed with light in his people's ancient rhythm. But then Blue noticed something surprising. Some aliens were trying to dance like the humans. Most looked awkward, with stiff movements and uncertain steps. But they were laughing, and the humans around them cheered encouragingly. I want to try, Blue said quietly, surprising herself. Amy's face lit up. Really? That's great. Here, start by just moving your feet to the beat. Blue tried to copy Amy's movements, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She felt stiff and unnatural, nothing like the flowing movements of the humans around her. I'm doing it wrong, Blue said, starting to step back. There is no wrong. Amy took her hands. That's what's so great about human dancing. As long as you're moving and having fun, you're doing it right. Slowly, Blue began to move more. She let her antennae sway freely instead of keeping them in their proper formal position. She moved her arms in ways that would have scandalized her dance teachers back home. And then something wonderful happened. She started having fun. The music changed to something faster, and Blue found herself moving without thinking. She spun around, her antennae swishing through the air, her feet making up their own patterns. She probably looked silly, but for the first time in her life, she didn't care. Look at you go, Amy cheered. Other students, both human and alien, had formed a circle around them, clapping to the beat. Even Green had stopped her spiral dance to watch. Blue, she called out, that's not the proper way to move. No, Blue agreed, spinning again. It's the fun way. More aliens joined their circle, some trying their own improvised moves. Humans helped them, showing them how to relax and feel the music. The dance floor became a mixture of traditional alien dances and free-form human movements, creating something entirely new. Later that night, as the festival wound down, Blue sat with Amy at one of the tables, her antenna still swaying slightly to the music. I never knew dancing could feel like that, Blue said. On my world, we spend years learning every step perfectly. But this? She gestured at the dance floor, where humans and aliens were still moving together. This feels alive. Amy smiled. That's because it is alive. It's not about being perfect. It's about being in the moment, being yourself. Blue looked at her feet, which were sore from dancing. Do you think? Could you teach me more human dances? Of course. Amy grinned. Though remember, the best human dancing is the kind you make up yourself. As they watched the last dancers on the floor, Blue realized she was starting to understand something about humans. They didn't just break rules. They showed others how wonderful life could be without so many rules in the way. Blue sat in the university cafeteria, staring at her food tray with unusual intensity. After weeks of watching humans, she had made a bold decision. Instead of eating her meal in the traditional way of her people, each food item separately, in order of size, she was going to mix them together. Are you sure about this? Green asked, watching nervously from across the table. The eating protocols have been unchanged for 10,000 years. That's exactly why they need to change, Blue said, pushing her antenna back with a new hair clip Amy had given her. Another break from tradition. Humans mix their foods all the time, and they seem to enjoy it more. Amy sat down next to them with her own tray, which was a chaotic mix of foods from Earth and other worlds. "What's going on?" she asked, noticing the tension. "Blue is going to break the eating protocols," Green whispered, as if saying it too loudly might summon their planet's elders. "Watch this," Blue said, feeling brave. She took her spoon and mixed the purple grain with the green protein cubes, a combination that would have made her old teachers faint. Then, before she could lose her courage, she took a bite. Her eyes widened. It's better. The flavors work together. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," Amy said, grinning. "Sometimes the best things happen when you try new combinations." Word spread quickly through the alien student community. By the end of lunch, several other students from Blue's world had come to watch her eat the human way. Some looked horrified, but others seemed curious. "But what about the other rules?" one of them asked. "If the eating protocols can be broken, what about the rest?" That question led Blue to think about all the other rules she'd been raised with. The next day, she wore her uniform without the traditional stiffening starch. The day after that, she laughed out loud in public, something her people only did in private. Each small rebellion felt both terrifying and wonderful. Professor Gray, who taught interspecies relations, noticed the change in Blue during class discussions. "You're speaking up more," he said after one particularly lively debate, "and your ideas are unconventional." "Is that bad?" Blue asked, worried. "On the contrary," the professor smiled. "It's exactly what this university hopes to achieve. Cultural exchange isn't just about learning others' ways. It's about questioning our own." Not everyone approved of Blue's changes. Some alien students started avoiding her, whispering that she was becoming too human. They sent concerned messages to the elders back home. "Don't let them bother you," Amy said one evening as they sat in their room. Blue was trying another human custom, painting her antenna tips with sparkly polish. "They're just scared of change." "But what if they're right?" Blue asked, looking at her reflection. "What if I'm betraying my culture?" "Culture isn't meant to be a cage," Amy said, helping Blue with the polish. "It's more like a garden. Sometimes you need to try new things to help it grow." That night, Blue received a stern message from her world's Cultural Preservation Council. They had heard about her concerning behavior and demanded she return to proper protocols immediately. Instead of feeling ashamed, Blue felt something new: determination. She sat down at her desk and wrote a response that would have shocked her former self. "Dear Council members, I am not abandoning our ways. I am exploring new ones. Our ancestors who created these rules must have been explorers too, trying new things to find what worked best. I believe it's time we started exploring again. Respectfully, Blue." After sending the message, she felt lighter somehow. Looking around her room, at her mixed-up art supplies, her decorated antenna, and her human friend painting at her easel, Blue realized something important. Sometimes breaking rules didn't destroy tradition. Sometimes it helped tradition grow into something better. The assignment seemed impossible when Professor White first announced it. Create something that combines techniques from two different species. Blue and Amy sat in their room, surrounded by art supplies from Earth and Blue's homeworld. "What if we mixed your light-bending crystals with my paints?" Amy suggested, holding up a jar of Blue's traditional art materials. These crystals were normally used to create precise patterns of refracted light. Beautiful but very structured. "Mix them, but they're not compatible," Blue said, then caught herself smiling, "which probably means we should try it." They spent hours experimenting. The crystals didn't mix well with regular paint, but Amy wouldn't give up. She tried different bases: oil, water, even something called epoxy that she bought from the art store. "Look," Amy suddenly shouted one evening. She had mixed the crushed crystals with clear epoxy, creating a substance that caught light like tiny stars. Now we just need to figure out how to paint with it. Blue studied the mixture. On my world, we use air currents to guide crystals into patterns. What if she grabbed one of Amy's paintbrushes and her own traditional air current tool? Working together, they found they could guide the crystal-infused epoxy into amazing shapes. The next few days were a blur of creation. Blue used her species' precise techniques to lay down complex patterns, while Amy added her free-flowing human style over and around them. When the light hit their work, it seemed to come alive, geometric alien patterns shifting and dancing through human organic shapes. "It's beautiful," Amy whispered when they finally finished. "It's not like anything I've ever seen before." "Because nothing like it has existed before," Blue replied, her antenna quivering with excitement. "We made something new." The day of presentation arrived. Other students had played it safe, mostly creating separate pieces that sat side by side. Green had worked with a human student named Mark, but they had kept their techniques carefully separated. When Blue and Amy unveiled their piece, the room went silent. As sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, their artwork blazed with color and movement. The precise alien patterns seemed to dance through Amy's flowing human designs, creating something that was neither human nor alien, but wonderfully both. Professor White walked slowly around their piece. Blue felt her antenna droop nervously. Had they gone too far? Broken too many rules? "In all my years of teaching," Professor White finally said, "I have never seen anything quite like this." The professor touched the surface gently, watching the light patterns shift. "This is true innovation, not just placing two techniques side by side, but finding a way to make them work together to create something entirely new." "But we didn't follow the traditional methods," Blue said quietly. "Traditional methods were new once too," Professor White replied. "Every artistic breakthrough in history came from someone willing to try something different." The professor turned to address the whole class. "This is why we created this university, not just to learn about each other's ways, but to discover new possibilities together." After class, several students gathered around to look at their work. Even Green seemed impressed. "I didn't think it was possible," she admitted. "Mixing techniques like this, it should have been a disaster. But it's amazing." Blue felt proud, but also a little sad. "The Art Council back home will probably say we disrespected our traditional materials." Amy put her arm around Blue's shoulders. "Or maybe they'll see that your traditions can grow and become even more beautiful when shared with others." Looking at their creation, Blue realized that this was what humans did best. They didn't just break rules, they found ways to make new things work. And now she was learning to do the same. The announcement appeared on every screen in the university. "First Annual Interplanetary Student Innovation Contest." Blue read it 3 times, her antenna twitching with nervous energy. Her people never entered competitions. It wasn't proper to seek attention for oneself. "You should enter," Amy said, pointing at the screen. "Your crystal paint art would be perfect for this." But Blue's antenna drooped. "My species doesn't compete. We believe it creates unhealthy rivalry." "It's not about rivalry," Amy explained, sitting cross-legged on her bed. "It's about sharing ideas. Think about it. Students from all over the galaxy will see what's possible when different species work together." The idea wouldn't leave Blue's mind. That night, she couldn't sleep, thinking about all the rules she'd already broken. One more couldn't hurt, right? The next morning, she submitted her application. Word spread quickly through the alien student community. Some, like Green, were shocked. "Competition is for humans," Green said during lunch. "We observe and learn. We don't participate." But to Blue's surprise, not everyone agreed. Red, who had been quietly experimenting with human music, defended her. "Maybe it's time we did more than just observe," he said. Blue spent weeks preparing her entry. She combined everything she'd learned. The crystal paint technique she'd developed with Amy, the free-form movements inspired by human dance, and the precise patterns of her people. Amy helped her practice presenting, teaching her human techniques for public speaking. Remember, Amy coached, humans like stories. Don't just show them what you made. Tell them why you made it. The day of the competition arrived. The university's main hall was packed with students and teachers from 100 worlds. Blue peeked through the curtains, her antenna practically vibrating with nervousness. "What if I embarrass my whole species?" she whispered to Amy. "You won't," Amy assured her. "You'll show them something new and wonderful. That's never embarrassing." When Blue's turn came, she walked onto the stage. Her traditional education told her to be formal and distant, but instead, she smiled at the audience, a human gesture she'd grown to love. "On my world," she began, "we have a saying. The path is already drawn. It means we should follow tradition without question. But humans taught me something different. They taught me that sometimes we need to draw new paths." She activated her piece, a huge crystal paint sculpture that combined light, color, and movement. As she moved her hands, the patterns shifted and flowed, traditional alien geometries morphing into free-flowing human shapes, and back again. The audience gasped. Even the judges, a mix of humans and aliens, leaned forward in their seats. Blue felt her confidence growing. She moved with the piece, adding elements of human dance to her traditional gestures, making the art respond to her movements. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, a human gesture that many aliens had adopted. Soon the whole room joined in, creating a thunderous applause. Later that evening, wearing the first-place ribbon, another human tradition she'd grown to appreciate, Blue sat with Amy and their friends. "You've changed things," Green said, looking thoughtful. "After your performance, 3 more students from our world entered the talent showcase next month." "Is that bad?" Blue asked. "No," Green replied slowly. "It's exciting. Like that human feeling. What do you call it? When you can't wait to see what happens next." "Anticipation," Amy supplied. "Yes, anticipation," Green nodded. "I think maybe we've all been doing things the same way for too long." Blue touched her ribbon, remembering how afraid she'd been to enter. "Sometimes," she said, "the best traditions are the new ones we make together." The end of the academic year brought unexpected visitors to Earth's International University. The Cultural Council from Blue's homeworld had decided to investigate the disturbing reports of changed behavior among their students. Blue watched from her room window as 3 tall figures in traditional robes walked toward the administration building. "Are you worried?" Amy asked, noticing how Blue's antenna had gone completely still, a sign of stress in her species. "A little," Blue admitted, "but also excited." "That's strange, isn't it?" "Not strange at all," Amy smiled. "It's called standing up for what you believe in." The council requested a meeting with all students from their world. Blue entered the university's conference room to find not just the council members, but also Professor White, Professor Gray, and several other teachers. To her surprise, many human students, including Amy, had gathered outside the room to show support. The head council member spoke first, his voice formal and disapproving. "We have received many reports of our students abandoning proper protocols, dancing without patterns, eating food in incorrect orders, creating art that defies all traditions. This is unacceptable." Blue felt her antenna droop, but then she saw Amy giving her a thumbs up through the window. She stood up, surprising everyone. "Respected council members," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "please let me show you something before you make your decision." She activated the room's holographic projector, displaying images from the past year, students from their world dancing freely with humans, the crystal paint art that had won the competition, new foods and styles, and ideas that combine the best of both worlds. "We haven't abandoned our traditions," Blue explained. "We've helped them grow. Humans taught us that rules shouldn't be chains. They should be foundations to build upon." Red stood up next. "My light sculpture music now includes human rhythms. It's been downloaded 1 million times back home. Then Green, to everyone's surprise, joined them. I've started a club where we teach humans our traditional dances, and they teach us theirs. We call it Dance Without Borders. More students shared their stories. Each one showed how human creativity had mixed with their traditional ways to create something new and wonderful. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, the head council member spoke again, but his tone had changed. When we created these protocols, thousands of years ago, we were a young species trying to find our way among the stars. Perhaps we became too focused on preserving the past and forgot about growing toward the future. To everyone's amazement, he smiled, an expression their species usually considered too informal for public use. We came here expecting to find our culture being destroyed. Instead, we find it evolving, becoming richer and more vibrant. This is not the disaster we feared. This is a renaissance. The room erupted in cheers, another human tradition that Blue had grown to love. The council announced that instead of restricting student behavior, they would create a new cultural innovation department back home, with Blue as their first consultant after graduation. Later that evening, the university held a celebration. Humans and aliens danced together, ate mixed-up foods, and shared stories. Blue watched it all from a quiet corner, her antenna swaying happily. "Penny for your thoughts?" Amy asked, using the human phrase Blue had learned to understand. "I was just thinking about my first day here," Blue said. "I was so scared of doing things wrong. But humans showed me that wrong can sometimes be exactly right." "That's what humans do best," Amy grinned. "We break rules, mix things up, and somehow make it work." Blue looked around at the celebration, at Red playing his new music, at Green teaching human students a modified version of the spiral dance, at the council members trying earth foods with curious expressions. "No," Blue said thoughtfully. "What humans do best is show others how to be brave enough to try new things. And that's the most important lesson of all."